When I arrived at church this morning, it had snowed. The paths were not yet cleared. Some very nice and generous folks showed up and did that for us. But earlier, even before that, Jonathan Bile, our events manager, was out front shoveling. And I walked up and I just kind of automatically said, kind of getting out of my stupor, hey, Jonathan, how you doing this morning? How's your morning going? And Jonathan looked up to me, got a big grin across his face and said, my morning's fantastic. This has been a great day so far. And I was like, poof. I was like, oh, okay, great. You know what you've been up to? But it shocked me. It jarred me out of my own just kind of pattern. His joy that he shared with me immediately brightened my day and filled me with a different spirit. It's as if, he might as well have just said, hey, Jonathan, how's it going? He might as well have just broken out into, oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. Because that's the kind of joy that came out of him when he was telling me about his morning. Well, that song, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from Oklahoma, was written by Oscar Hammerstein. Oscar Hammerstein, right? Stein, not Steen. Stein. Steen? Stein. Tomato. Hammerstein. I'm going to go Stein. The second. He wrote that song, and it makes sense that a guy who wrote that song would have shared these words with us. I have an unusual statement to make. I'm a man who believes he is happy. What makes it unusual is that a man who is happy seldom tells anyone. The unhappy man is more communicative. He is eager to recite what is wrong with the world, and he seems to have a talent for gathering large audiences. It is a modern tragedy that despair has so many spokesmen and hope so few. I believe, therefore, it is important for a man to announce that he is happy, even though such an announcement is less dramatic and less entertaining than the cries of his pessimistic opposite. Oscar Hammerstein was okay with being happy. That doesn't mean that everything in Oscar's life was peachy keen and glorious mornings every single day, but he considers himself a happy person and felt that it might be helpful for him to share that. And so we are saying that this morning. What an odd thing to say, but it's okay to be happy. It's okay to take true delight in that first sip of coffee in the morning. It's okay to be sensual and to love your body. It's okay to dance wildly to drums if you would like to. It's okay to fall in love with life. It's okay to claim it. Whatever it is that makes you joyful, whatever it is that makes you happy, it's okay. It's good to know those things in our lives that make us joyful. And my guess is there are some commonalities, and my guess is each of us has our own little particulars that we have found in our life that might spark joy inside of us. It's good to know what these things are. It's good to claim them so we might have them and access them when we need them. You know what I like? One of the things I like? You got to know what you like. I like beach balls. I also like trying to keep things in the air and beat records. And I think that we can do this and get it in the air 10 times. Do you think so? First service did it. But the first service didn't have the choir. And so I'm realizing to make this true, we have to get 10, but somehow, and maybe I can be in the middle here, but it has to get to the choir too, I think. Right? So I don't know. Are you game? Do you think we can do it? All right, let's try. All right. Are you ready? You got to get to 10. All right. 1. All right. 1. We got 1. Celebrate the day. We got 1. All right. Get it up. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All right. 4. New record. We beat 1. We got 4. All right. It's coming for you at some point. I don't know. We'll start it up there. That's a good thinking. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4. We got 4 again. And I should say, no one hurt yourself too. I should have led with that. Okay, no diving. Okay, the stakes are not that high. Okay, well, that made sense starting with the choir. Let's start with the choir. 1. All right, Nancy, you can start us off here. Launch it in. Got it. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Well done. 18. Nice sweater, Steve. 18. 18. Well, that's a far cry from the 1 that we got when we started. So it's good to know what makes you happy. I think beach balls make me happy. That's fun. Sometimes you got to stop what you're doing, even if it's in the middle of a sermon, and claim some happiness and claim some joy. Well done, 18. Yeah, you beat first service by 8. Well done. Well done. Let's see here. Where was I? Shalom Harkin wrote a poem called Say Wow. Say wow. Each day before our surroundings become flat with familiarity, and the shapes of our lives click into place, dimensionless and average as Tetris cubes. Before hunger knocks from our bellies like a cantankerous old man, and the duties of the day stack up like dishes, and the architecture of our basic needs commissions all thought to construct the 4-door sedan of safety. Before gravity clings to our skin like a cumbersome parasite, and the colored dust of dreams sweeps itself obscure in the vacuum of reason. Each morning, before we wrestle the world and our hearts into the shape of our brains, look around and say, wow. Feed yourself fire. Scoop up the day entire like a planet-sized bouquet of marvel sent by the universe directly into your arms and say, wow. Break yourself down into the basic components of primitive awe and let the crescendo of each moment carbonate every capillary and say, wow. Yes, before our poems become calloused with revision, let them shriek off the page of spontaneity, and before our metaphors get too regular, let the sun stay a conflagration of homing pigeons that fights through fire each day to find us. Say, wow. Saying wow is something that can open space in our hearts and in our lives for joy, to notice the world around us. And so I am going to invite you now to look around this room, outside the windows, just look somewhere and find something and practice some primitive awe and just find something that could possibly make you say, wow. And then when you find that something, say, wow. Wow. Great. So now I'll invite you to just share with someone around you what it was that you located and said wow about. And I wonder if we'll hear some different things from different people. Just share what you said wow about. Fantastic. I hear giggling and I hear laughter and I see faces smiling. And what just happened is that we said wow ourselves, but then we shared our wow with somebody else. And then that joy kind of spread. It spread around. Ralph Waldo Emerson has this wonderful phrase. He said, scattered joy, scattered joy. If you happen to have it, if you find yourself fortunate enough in any moment to have joy and you're feeling happiness, scatter that around and share that with the world. You might increase the joy in the world. We share our joys and our sorrows here each week, and it's been said that a sorrow shared is a sorrow divided, and a joy shared is a joy multiplied. And indeed, I had that experience this morning. Sometimes we hear all joys and sometimes we hear all sorrows. We had both this morning, and we held them both. And the joys lifted my hearts and the sorrows broke my heart, as it should be. But joy can spread if it is scattered. We know this. I just watched that happen in real time. But we've all had this experience of seeing joyous people and having something inside of us spark alive, or watching children play. And sometimes if we see people laughing, a smile might start to creep across our own face. Even if we don't know why they're laughing, there's just something about seeing joy that touches our own heart. We feel our own spirits lift when we encounter joy. Sometimes it doesn't permeate. Sometimes, frankly, we're in crummy moods, and that's okay too. And it might not quite get through. But I do believe that joy is generative, that love is generative, it is creative, and that it can spread. We've all experienced this in our life. And if you still don't believe me, if you still say, I'm not having it, I dare you to listen to the choir sing this song and not smile.
That's handy.
I sing because I'm happy.
I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me.
I sing because I'm happy.
I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me.
I sing, oh yes, I sing.
Because I'm happy.
I sing, oh yes, I sing.
Because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches
I told you so. I know you're not supposed to say I told you so, but I told you so. Joy can spread. If joy is in our hearts, it can spread. Though there's a reason that Oscar Hammerstein said it's odd or unusual for someone to say they are happy. And I wonder if this is in part because we feel slightly guilty about being happy with all that is going on in the world, with all that is wrong in the world, with so much suffering happening in the world. Who are we? How dare we be happy? With refugee crises, with children in poverty, with massive immigration problems, with Black and brown bodies continually to be systematically oppressed, with environmental degradation. In the face of all this, how dare we be happy? Who are we to not be held to acknowledge and to feel all that suffering ourselves? Well, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis's predecessor, and if you remember Pope Benedict, he was a rather dour fellow. I don't know that I ever saw him smile once, which is great because he wrote this wonderful piece on happiness. We all show our happiness in different ways, of course, right? Pope Benedict wrote, when someone rejoices, he's afraid of offending against solidarity with the many people who suffer. I don't have any right to rejoice, people think, in a world where there is so much misery, so much injustice. And I can understand that. There is a moral attitude at work here, but this attitude is nonetheless wrong. The loss of joy does not make the world better. And conversely, refusing joy for the sake of suffering does not help those who suffer. The contrary is true. The world needs people who discover the good and rejoice in it, and thereby derive the impetus and courage to do good. Joy then does not break with solidarity when it is the right kind of joy, when it is not egotistic, when it comes from the perception of the good, then it wants to communicate itself and it gets passed on. He writes that joy can offer us the impetus and courage to do good. Joy helps us help others when our own spirit is feeling buoyant. It helps us to reach out. It's interesting that the Pope begins at the end of the reading to talk about joy as if it's its own force in the world. He writes, it wants to communicate itself. It gets passed on. Indeed, joy wants to communicate itself. It knows what it can do. It knows what happens when it spreads. Joy wants to be in the world. When I was at home one holiday for the holidays at Rebecca's family, my wife, one of her cousins is Jewish, and he and his wife came by, and they could only stay for one day because they had the next day a very busy day. They had a memorial for a family friend who had died, and they also had a wedding on the same day. And I said, well, that is at the same time? It's, yes, at the exact same time. I said, well, how are you going to choose what to do? How do you pick? And he said without pause, oh, we're going to the wedding. My Jewish faith offers me to choose joy instead of sorrow. Focused first on joy, he said, is a part of the Judaistic tradition. That doesn't mean that he wasn't sad. It wasn't meaning that he was not going to reach out to that family, which he did. But he chose and focused on the joy and sorrow in his heart, for sure. They can coexist. But he would say his Jewish tradition has him ground himself in something that is sustaining. We all have a range of emotions, and this is perfectly human and perfectly natural, of course. Emotions like from inside out that the youth showed us this morning. Sadness and anger and disgust and fear and joy, all of these coexisting together. Sadness, anger, disgust, and fear are a natural part of life, a natural response to life. And joy coexists with them. The hope is that we're not ever sad, or that we're not ever fearful, but that we can hold on to joy and have a heart that can hold them both. Every person in this room has something that they're joyful about today. And every single person in this room has sadness in their heart for something as well. But it's good to turn our hearts toward that joy. You might not hear this anymore when you're on a plane, but think back to one of the first times you actually flew on a plane, and maybe you listened to the flight attendant announcements at the beginning, but they say when, should there be a decrease in cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will come down. Put your own mask on first before helping those around you, any children that might be in the seats next to you. Well, they do this, of course, it's a great metaphor. They do this because if you don't get your own mask on first, you might pass out and fall over, and then no one gets a mask on. It's an apt metaphor for taking care of ourselves and allowing ourselves joy in our own life so that we can help and attend to the world around us. Pleasure is good. Pleasure is good. What a strange thing it is to say that and have it sound kind of odd, that we would have to declare that it's okay that pleasure is good. And we're not talking about the selfish kind of pleasure. Again, going back to the Pope's reading, he said it's not the egotistical kind. It's not the kind that harms other people. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about pleasure in our lives and what it can offer us in our lives. Adrienne Marie Brown is a community organizer and author and general all-around incredible person. And she wrote a book called Pleasure Activist, The Politics of Pleasure. And she reminds us to enjoy being alive and to do this on purpose, to do it on purpose. She writes, pleasure, embodied, connected pleasure is one of the ways we know we are free, that we are always free, that we always have the power to co-create in the world. Pleasure helps us move through the times that are unfair, through grief and loneliness, through the terror of genocide, or days when the demands are just overwhelming. Pleasure heals the places where our hearts and spirit get wounded. Pleasure reminds us that even in the dark, we are alive. Pleasure is medicine for the suffering that is absolutely promised in life. Pleasure is the point. Feeling good is not frivolous, it is freedom. The choir is saying, I sing because I'm happy, I sing because I am free. Pleasure is good. Joy, when we experience it fully and out loud, might stand out, much like Jonathan's did this morning to me. It took me out of the normal pattern of my day, and I was grateful for it. It's engaging, and it's responding to the universe that is at all times reaching out to us. I used to work at a restaurant called Bahama Breeze. It was a Caribbean-themed restaurant, the same Darden restaurant, kind of like Olive Garden, but for Caribbean food. And so I worked at this restaurant, and one of the things I noticed after working for a little bit is how people use complaining about being at work as a very available relationship tool. So that's misery loves company, right? So everybody You get to work and say, hey, how's it going? Oh, I got 3 hours till I get off. Oh, I hear you. Yeah, I can't wait. And, how's your shift going? Oh, it stinks. The manager stinks. And yeah, oh yeah, it sure does. And can you believe that? Yeah, and the cook, he's late. And yeah. So people would just complain. And that's how they related to one another. It was like the common language that everyone spoke together was to complain about their job. And so I did this. I did it. I would get there and I would just start complaining about that and just looking forward to when I get done. And then I realized one day that I didn't believe any of that stuff. There's a weird sadistic part of myself that likes waiting tables. And I enjoyed all the people that I worked with. And so work actually wasn't that bad. And so I made a commitment to stop doing that, to find other ways to relate to people, to not just simply say that easy thing to complain about my shift, to relate to people. And what it did was it radically changed my experience of my day, because I wasn't just automatically being pessimistic, as we heard in our first reading, but I was just naturally just doing what I was going to do. And what it did, it oddly stuck out to people. They were like, this guy's not complaining. What's wrong with him? But it was kind of a courageous act, because I had to let go of the relationship building that complaining would get. And so sometimes joy is a countercultural act. Sometimes working with our joy in the world around us might make us stand out a little bit. And I would say, good for you and good for all the people around you as well. The author Molly Fumia writes, to be joyful in the universe is a brave and reckless act. The courage for joy springs not from our certainty of human experience, but the surprise, our astonishment at being loved, our bold willingness to love in return. These wonders promise the possibility of joyfulness, no matter how often and how harshly love seems to be lost. Therefore, despite the world's sorrows, we give thanks for our loves, for our joys, and for the continued courage to be happily surprised. So sometimes we need courage to claim our joy. This joy can bind us closer together instead of push us apart. To be joyous can invite vulnerability into our lives. It asks us to be present. Joy asks us to be mindful and to open our hearts. And so I'll end with these words again from Adrienne Marie Brown from her book, Pleasure Activist. That's right, pleasure activist. To be an activist for pleasure, to claim it. She writes, recognize that pleasure is a measure of freedom. Notice what makes you feel good and what you are curious about. Learn ways that you can increase the amount of feeling good time in your life. To have abundant pleasure, decrease any internal or projected shame or scarcity thinking around the pursuit of pleasure, quieting any voices of trauma that keep you from your full, sacred, sensual self. Create more room for joy, wholeness, and aliveness, and less room for oppression, repression, self-denial, and unnecessary suffering in your life. Identify strategies beyond denial or repression for navigating pleasure in relationships with others, and begin to understand the liberation possible when we collectively orient around pleasure and longing. And the bonus is that you might realize that you are a pleasure activist if you do this. To be pleasure activists, to say there is nothing wrong with pleasure, indeed, there's a great deal right with it. To say, if you're happy and you know it, to then go ahead and clap your hands. To say, wow, more often. May it be so, this day and every day.